Fine. So, good morning once again. So, in the last class, I had stopped. I had stopped at the point of defining as to what do we mean by variation of a function. So, if I have to summarize whatever we have done until now, what we said was that in any physical problem that you take, you have a certain domain of analysis, a region in which you would like to estimate some quantities. Quantities inside this domain, which vary from point to point and which vary with time, are called field variables. So, for example, in thermal analysis, you have temperature and heat flux. In solid mechanics, you have displacement and stresses. In fluid mechanics, you have velocity and stresses, and so on. So, you have any problem, you have domain of analysis, and you have some associated field variables. Now, these field variables, they cannot occur randomly within the domain, but rather they need to occur in a manner that the conservation laws are satisfied and also the material laws. Now, when we impose the conservation laws over any arbitrary sub-region within the domain, then we end up with some partial differential equations which have to be satisfied at all points in the domain at all time. Now, in this particular partial differential equation, if we further simplify this PDE using the material law, then we get the final governing differential equation. So whatever is the solution to the problem, it needs to satisfy the final governing differential equation within the domain, and it also needs to satisfy the boundary conditions and associated initial conditions. Now, until this point, we were talking only about formulating a problem. Now, once you formulate a problem, then comes the question of solving it. And in order to solving partial differential equations exactly over complicated domains for general boundary conditions is impossible, means extreme, except in some rare cases you never get exact solutions to problems. So we need to work for ways to get approximate solutions to problems, and this is where the variational methods or integral methods come into play. So I had said that instead of trying to satisfy the PDE at all points, what we will do is we will actually satisfy the weighted integral or the weak form statement of the problem. So I had defined what these are in the last class, and the weight function in these weighted integral and weak form statement, I had said, is interpreted as the admissible variation in the field variable. Okay, now fine, let us continue with from where we had left off, which is variation in the field variable. So if u of x is the solution to the problem, then any admissible variation in u is defined as epsilon times function v and is denoted as delta u. So we will use the symbol delta to represent the variation operator. So variation in function is defined as some scalar parameter epsilon. Epsilon is a constant, it doesn't vary from point to point. Okay, so it is defined as epsilon times v, and physically what does it mean? So any perturbation from this function u is defined as u plus variation of u, and we keep adding the word admissible in our statements. So what do we mean by admissible? What we mean is that that u plus variation of u. So what we mean by admissible change is that the u plus variation in u need to satisfy the essential boundary conditions. Okay, so if u at x naught equals to u naught, then u plus variation in u at x naught must also be equal to u naught. Then we can immediately see that the variation in the function at places where you are imposing u would be equal to 0. Okay, now moving forward, now for the next few minutes we will be looking at the properties of the variation operator. Okay, so now let us consider a function f which varies from point to point and which depends on u as well as derivative of u. So for example u could be temperature and f could be heat flux, or u could be displacement, f could be stress. Okay, so f is basically a quantity which depends on u. So now if we want, so the way we define variation of f is like this. So delta of f is equal to f at x comma u plus variation of u minus f at u. Okay, then we define variation in function f as epsilon into limit epsilon tending to 0 delta f by epsilon. Okay, so this is going to be the definition of variation of a function f which depends on u. Now let us see what we will get for variation of f. Now from Taylor series expansion, what will be delta f? So it will be f plus, so we are first writing f at x, f at u plus delta u and u dash plus delta u dash. So what will it be? So fine, so you use Taylor series expansion, you expand f minus f. So what will happen? F and f cancel off and you are left with delta f equals to this thing. Okay, now in order to get the variation, we first have to divide delta f with epsilon and take limit epsilon tending to 0. So if we do that, what happens? So if you divide with epsilon, so in this term and this term, epsilon cancels off. In all other terms, you have epsilon, a factor of epsilon or epsilon to higher power. Okay, so when you take limit epsilon tending to 0, only these two terms remain, everything else vanishes. So what will then that become? df du times u plus df du dash times u dash. Okay, now to get variation of f, we have to multiply this whole thing with epsilon. If we do that, what is this was v, not u, this is v. So what is epsilon times v? It is variation of u. What is epsilon times v dash? It is variation of u dash. So variation of f is simply equal to partial derivative of f with respect to u times variation of u plus partial derivative of f with respect to u dash times variation of u dash. Now what do you recollect? It tends to behave something like the differential operator. So in differential operator also, remember that if for example you have f which is a function of x and y, then what is df? df is written as equal to partial derivative of f with respect to x times dx plus partial derivative of f sorry. So what is it? It is partial derivative of f with respect to y times dy. Okay. So the differential operator obeys this chain rule. The variational operator also behaves in the same manner. Okay. In fact, if you so if they are behaving in the same manner, what is the difference between differential operator and variation operator? Anybody? When we are looking at differential, okay, so if I say df, what am I talking about? What does df?
Derivative of f.
No, I understand that it is differential of f. What does it mean physically? Df, d smaller.
A change in the function when we change incrementally x and y.
So change in the function value for an infinitesimal change in the position. Okay. So when we are talking about the differential operator, we are talking about how the function changes in the neighborhood of a point. Okay. Now on the other hand, what does the variation operator tell us? So
the position is same, but the output of function is changed.
So for the variation operator, the variation is defined not just in one position, but rather it is defined at all points within the domain. Okay, and we are not talking about how function value changes about a certain point, but rather we are talking about possible changes in the function value at all points within the domain. Okay, so that's the difference between differential and variation operator. And similar to differential operator, you can do variation operator also has these properties. Okay, so variation of, so it has this variation of f1 plus minus f2 will be variation of f1 plus minus variation of f2. Variation of f1 f2 will be, so product rule. Okay, so whatever properties the differential operator has, the variation operator also has those properties. Then variation operator can also commute with respect to the differential and the integral operator. Okay, so if one second, let me finish this page and then you can ask. So if you see, for example, if you have a derivative d by dx of variation of u, then it will be equal to variation of du by dx. And if you have integral a to b u dx, then variation of that will be equal to integral a to b variation of u dx. How can you prove all of this? You can use the basic definition that if you have a function, variation in the function is equal to epsilon into limit epsilon tending to 0 delta f divided by epsilon. So by using that definition, you can show that the variation operator has the same set of properties as the differential operator, and in addition it can commute with the differential and the integral operators. Okay, yeah, please now you can ask your doubt.
Can you give a live example for that variation under that?
Yes, I am going to consider some problems, and then over there it will become clear as to how we are using this. Okay, So if you want live or if you want some practical example, I can give you something simple. So for example, if you have, so if you have, let us say Q is defined as minus K into gradient of temperature. Okay. So now if I am interested in what is the variation in Q for some variation in temperature field, then variation of Q will be, what will it be? See, variation, will it affect scalar quantities? K, thermal conductivity. Will variation act on thermal conductivity?
No, sir. No, sir.
We are talking about variation in something as a function of variation in temperature. So if temperature varies, will okay, so we will take the thermal conductivity, it won't get affected. And then I have variation of gradient of T. I told you that variation operator commutes with differential operators, so I can write this as variation of, sorry, gradient of variation of temperature. Okay. Now let us say you have some strain energy density. Okay. So let us say you have W is equal to half, sorry, some problem, half EA, half EA times du by dx, du by dx, sorry, my pen is creating problem, square. Okay. Now if I want to look at variation of W, anybody, what will it be? What will be the variation in strain energy per unit length per a bar as a function of variation in the displacement field? What will it be? What will it be? Sorry, can you repeat? No, come on. On E and A, will the variation affect E and A? It won't affect, right? So if I am looking at, variation of, um, if I am looking at variation of the whole thing, then what will it be? It will be, so variation in strain energy density will be, so half times EA will come out. Okay, it's a constant, it will come out, and then apply that power rule. So what will it be? So think of it more like a differential operator. It will be 2 times du by dx into variation of du by dx. But then variation commutes with differential operator, so it will become d times variation in u by dx. Okay. So now in here the 2 and 2, 2 in the numerator, 2 in the denominator will cancel off. So what will it be? It will finally be EA into du by dx into variation in u by dx. Okay. So any doubt until here? You need to practice. That's the only way you are going to get comfortable with this stuff. But as such, any doubts? Okay, let me move on. Can you speak loudly, please? You're not audible. Huh. Yes, it's a function of x, but see, in the variation operator, so what is your doubt?
Sir, f was function of x, u, and u dash. So
We
in
are
the
we are talking when we are talking about variation operator at at a given point we are talking about how the function is changing. Okay, we are not really talking about variation of function in the neighborhood of a point, but rather we are talking about at a given point how the function value is changing.
that's why x didn't appear.
Yeah, that's the reason that when we are applying the variation operator, x will not matter. Means x will not come into play.
So over entire domain.
It is over entire domain. Yeah, yeah. Okay. What am I doing? This appeared again. Sorry. Okay. Now, see, whenever we are deriving governing equations, there are actually two methods of deriving the governing equations. I already talked about the first method. What was the first method? We applied the conservation laws and then the material laws and we got the governing differential equations. There is one more method which is that we actually define a functional and we say that the solution to the problem minimizes or maximizes the functional. So if you take structural analysis, then what do you know? You know that whatever is the equilibrium configuration of a structure, means whatever is the deformed shape of the structure, it minimizes the potential energy of the structure. Okay, this is something that you know is valid in solid mechanics when you are dealing with small deformations and linear elasticity. You can also use this statement in order to derive the governing differential equation. So how do we do this? So for example, consider this axial bar, okay, which is subjected to a distributed force F and at the end is connected to the wall using a spring with spring constant K. Now, what will be the potential energy of this particular structure? It will be, so if I take a small length dx, so if I take a small length dx, okay, what will be the what will be the strain within this length dx? What will be the strain in the bar? uh, what will be the strain in the bar? How do we denote the strain? If you,
Du by dx.
so if u denotes the axial displacement, if u is the displacement field, then the strain field for a bar is nothing but du by dx, right? What will be the stress? What will be the stress? The stress will be equal to E times du by dx. Okay, so what will be the strain energy density? It will be half into E into du by dx whole square. Now that is strain energy density, meaning strain energy per unit volume. But what is volume? Volume equals to cross sectional area times dx. So on the whole, what does this term denote? EA into du by dx whole square. What will it denote? It will denote strain energy strain energy per unit length, per unit length. Okay. Now how do you get strain energy over the whole domain? You simply do the integral of x varying from 0 to L. So over here I did not show, but this length over here is L and this coordinate here is x. Okay. So all right, then what is the external work done? Sorry, this is strain energy in the bar. What will be the potential energy or the strain energy inside this spring? It will be stored energy in the spring will be half k x square or compression square. What will be the amount of compression? It will be simply displacement at this L. Okay, displacement at L. Okay, I am using capital L instead of small l, so let me do that. Okay, so this thing. And what is external work done? What are the external forces? You have distributed forces. So F is a distributed force. So over a length dx, what will be the force acting on the bar? F into dx. So what will be the work done by that force? F into dx into u at that point. So fine. So in order to get the total external work done, and in potential energy, external work done will have a negative sign. So you have a minus integral 0 to L F into u into dx. Okay. So this over here is external work done. External work done. Work done. Okay. So what is potential energy? Potential energy is basically equal to the stored energy minus the external work done. In this case, stored energy is stored in the form of strain energy in the bar and in the form of stored energy in the spring. Okay, fine. So this is the expression for potential energy. Now we know that the potential energy must be minimum at equilibrium. Okay, now at equilibrium, or in other words, the solution to the problem minimizes the potential energy. If the solution to the problem minimizes the potential energy, what should the variation in the potential energy for an admissible variation in displacement be? See, all of you are familiar with this differential operator, right? So if I have some function f as f which is a function of x, okay, so let us say the solution is minimum at x star. Okay, now what will be df, what will be df at x star? What will be the change in f for some small change in x at x star? It will be 0, right? In the same manner, now here what are we varying? We are looking at variation in potential energy for an admissible variation in the displacement field. Okay, now we know that the solution to the problem minimizes the potential energy. So what does it mean? For some small changes from the solution, what should happen to the potential energy? What would be the change in potential energy for some small variation in U? It should be 0. Okay, so if you are at the solution, variation in the potential energy must be 0. So if variation in potential energy must be 0, what is the statement? Then it is variation of this integral plus variation of this term must be equal to 0. Now variation, I said it commutes with the integral, okay, and it is unaffected by these parameters. So what will happen? I can take it inside the integral. So this, what does the first term become? Ea by 2 du by dx whole square, if I am going to look at variation of that. So it becomes Ea into du by dx into d variation of u by dx. We already did that. F is f affected by u. What is F? F is the external force, external distributed force. Is it affected by u? External force is not a function of solution to the problem. So variation operator will not affect F. It will only affect u. So F times u, if I am looking at variation of this, it is simply F into variation of u. And for this term, what happens? Again, k is unaffected and you get u into this. So it becomes k into u at L into variation of u at L equals to 0. Now, anybody, do you have any doubts until here? Until here, do you have any doubts? Now, in this particular statement, if I take variation of u and if I replace it with w, weight function w, okay, if I replace variation of u with w, then basically this statement here, which I get by imposing variation in potential energy to be 0, is nothing but the weak form statement. Okay, it is nothing but the weak form statement. And this statement here in mechanics, what is this statement called in mechanics? No, this is, you get the principle of virtual work. This is the principle, you get principle of virtual work. What is principle of virtual work? What is the statement of principle of virtual work? Have all of you heard about it? Okay, fine, leave it. If you haven't heard, leave it. It's not a big thing. But if I replace variation in u with w, I am going to get the weak form statement. Now, taking integration by parts, I can transfer the derivative from variation to u, and after that I am going to use the fact that variation in u at 0 is 0, in which case we will finally end up with this statement, okay, that integral 0 to L, this must be true. Now, what do we know about the variation in u? Variation in u, is there only one way to pick variation in u, or there are infinite ways in which we can pick variation in u? The arbitrary change in u, is there only one way to pick arbitrary change in u, or there are infinite ways? There are infinite ways, right? So for example, if I am looking at u as a function of x, and then so let us say that this is u, okay. Now admissible change in u, okay, there are so many different ways in which I can do this. So for example, this is one, okay, this is an admissible change, okay, this is an admissible change. There are infinite ways, okay. Each one is u plus variation in u, but it's a different variation, okay. So there are infinite ways to pick variation in u. So if there are infinite ways to pick variation in u, what can we tell about the terms in the brackets? Ea into d square, u by dx square plus f. And so what can we say about that? So because variation in u is arbitrary, then this term must be equal to 0 for all points in the domain, and this term must be equal to 0 on the boundary. So this equation, okay, this governing differential equation which you obtain through this minimization statement and all that, it is referred to as Euler equation. Okay, and this boundary condition which you are getting from the, once again, from the minimization statement, this boundary condition is referred to as the natural boundary condition. Okay, so there are two ways to derive the governing equations. One is through conservation laws, and then through imposing the material law. Second one is by minimizing a relevant potential. Okay, minimizing or maximizing a relevant potential, so that at the solution variation in the potential for admissible variation in u will be equal to 0. Now, why do you think that we need different ways to get governing equations? Anybody? Why do you think this other method of deriving governing equations from potentials would be useful or would be a good thing?
Sometimes we can't model using normal continuity energy equations.
So one of the biggest, okay, two main advantages. Okay, first thing is potential. Now, what kind of a thing is potential? Is it a scalar? Is it a vector, tensor? What kind of a thing is potential? Potential is a scalar. Okay, it's a scalar function. That is the first big advantage, that scalar functions are easy to understand, easy to write. Okay, so it's a scalar function, it's easy to deal with. Then the second thing is, when you are writing something like a potential, then you can use your intuition to impose simplifications in the problem. Okay, like for example, if you are looking at beam bending, if you want to neglect, let's say, shear effects, okay, then you can write the strain energy only including the bending strain energy. Okay, so that is next main advantage, that you can impose simplifications. You can impose simplifications in a neat and clean manner. Okay, so the main point is the governing equations you can arrive at using two different ways. All right, so
Why,
yeah.
sir, you told that since we are considering the potential energy as a which is correct quantity, therefore it will be easy to derive. But in bending equation, why if it is bending equation also, but when we consider potential energy, we have to consider shear strain energy and all that.
That's what I was saying, right? That's what I was saying, right? That if you know that the contribution to the strain energy from shear is very little as compared to that from bending, if you know that, then in that case you can approximate the strain energy to be that coming only from bending. I am using the word approximate. Okay, so it allows you to simplify problems. Many times you want some answer rather than no answer. You want to get something which is more or less correct. Okay, so it allows you to do simplifications. Okay, so now see, earlier from the differential equation we got the weighted integral statement and the weak form statement, right? Now in many problems, so take this was the differential equation. The what do you say, the boundary conditions were little different. In the earlier problem we considered, for which we got the weak form statement and the weighted integral statement, we had u at 0 was u0 and a du by dx at L was equal to q0, but fine. So in this case you also have some extra term over here, doesn't matter. So how do you get the weighted integral statement? You bring all terms to one side, say that that's residual, and then weighted integral statement is simply weight function multiplied by residual integrated over the domain is equal to 0. And then how do you get the weak form? You do integration by parts, okay, and then you impose the boundary conditions after that, and you get the weak form statement. Now once you get till this stage, if you replace w with variation in u, then what you can do is the weak form statement can be written as variation in some functional is equal to 0, and that functional can be thought of as the potential as some potential. And basically then what happens is the problem you are solving has a physical interpretation of this of minimizing or maximizing a functional. Why do you think this may be helpful? If you know that your solution, let's say, minimizes a functional, why do you think that would be of help? Okay, this is a little difficult, but when you are solving problems using some iterative schemes, okay, you start with some guess for the solution and you need to go to the next guess. But how do you pick the next guess? If you know that your solution is a minimum, then what you try to do is you try to move in the direction where the functional is reducing, okay. So if you know that solution to a problem minimizes some functional, then you can use that information in order to march ahead in iterative schemes, okay, in order to look for solutions in iterative schemes, okay. So any doubts or questions?
Sir, therefore, in all the cases, we will be looking for minimization of the functional because it will result in convergence in all the iterations.
Don't mix things. So convergence is different thing. I was talking about searching for solution. So if you know that the solution minimizes a functional, then you can take your next step. You can take your next step in a manner that the function value reduces. The value of the functional reduces as you march ahead. Okay.